All right, everyone, buckle up, because today we are diving headfirst into one of the most, let's just say, interesting nominations we've seen in a while. That's right, we're talking about Kash Patel and his bid to be the head honcho of the FBI.
Yeah, it's been generating a ton of buzz, and it's not all positive. I mean, when you have even folks from within his own party, those 23 former Republican officials publicly denouncing the nomination, things are going to be lively.
Lively is one way to put it. I mean, just the sheer volume of stuff swirling around this guy, it's wild.
Absolutely. And we really wanted to, take a good hard look at it all. So we went deep into the coverage of his Senate hearing, looking at the reports, the arguments, the testimonies, you name it. And let me tell you, it's a rabbit hole.
A total rabbit hole. So where do we even start? Let's see, we've got his ambitious crime reduction goals, which, I gotta say, sound almost too good to be true.
Right, like cut drug deaths, homicides, and rapes in half.
I mean, if he pulls that off, he's basically a superhero. But, the skeptic in me is wondering, what would it even take to achieve those kinds of reductions?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. It's not just about how, it's about what if. Like, if he did somehow manage to hit those targets, what would it mean for the FBI? Would their priorities shift? Would their methods change?
That's a really good point. And then there's his, let's call it colorful past. We're talking about his associations with certain podcasts and online communities that, shall we say, traffic in some pretty fringe ideas.
Yeah, we can't ignore those. And we're not just talking about casual browsing here. There are reports of Patel engaging with the QAnon community, which, for our listeners who might not be familiar, is a whole other can of worms.
Definitely. So for folks who haven't gone down that particular internet rabbit hole, what is QAnon and why are experts so concerned about it?
Well, to put it simply, it's this elaborate and completely unsubstantiated conspiracy theory that claims there's this, cabal of Satan-worshipping pedophiles running the world. And they believe Trump is like this lone warrior fighting against them.
Okay, wow. So not exactly mainstream thinking.
Not even close. And the thing is, QAnon has actually been linked to real-world violence. I mean, remember the January 6th attack on the Capitol? Yeah, a lot of those involved were QAnon believers, and that's why law enforcement sees it as such a threat.
Right, because it's not just online chatter anymore. It's spilling over into real-life actions and sometimes violent ones.
Exactly. And when you have someone like Patel, who's been linked to this community, potentially leading the FBI, the agency responsible for investigating those very acts of violence, it raises some serious concerns.
Huge red flag for sure. And then there's the whole chainsaw meme incident. The one where he's standing over figures representing his political opponents with a chainsaw.
Yeah, not exactly the image of someone who's known for their level-headedness and calm demeanor, right?
Not really the vibe you want from the potential head of the FBI. I mean, even if it was meant as a joke, it raises questions about his judgment, his temperament. Can someone like that really lead an organization that's supposed to be, above all else, impartial and objective?
And that's the crux of it, right? The FBI needs a leader who can keep a cool head, who's focused on the facts, not on scoring political points or settling personal vendettas.
And speaking of political points in January 6th, we can't ignore Patel's involvement there. This guy actually produced a song featuring people who were involved in the attack, and then he has the audacity to call them political prisoners.
It's mind-boggling. I mean, here's a guy potentially about to lead the very agency tasked with investigating the events of January 6th, and he's openly sympathizing with those who participated in it, calling them political prisoners. That's not exactly a recipe for impartial investigations, is it?
Definitely not. And it feeds right into those concerns about political bias potentially influencing the FBI's actions.
Absolutely. It erodes public trust, and that's a dangerous thing.
Right, so we've talked a lot about the concerning stuff, the red flags, the potential conflicts of interest. But to be fair, Patel has also outlined some pretty ambitious goals, particularly when it comes to crime reduction.
Yeah, he's talking about some seriously lofty targets. Cutting drug deaths, homicides, and rapes in half, that's a tall order, to say the least.
I mean, it sounds fantastic on paper, but is it even remotely realistic?
Well, to figure that out, we need to look beyond the sound bites. We need to understand the current crime trends, the resources available to law enforcement, the complex social factors at play. Take the opioid epidemic, for example. That's not something you solve with just tougher policing. You need public health initiatives, community outreach, treatment programs, a whole multifaceted approach.
So even if Patel is completely sincere, even if he has the most brilliant strategy ever devised, achieving those goals would be a Herculean effort, requiring a massive shift in the FBI's priorities and a whole lot of resources.
Precisely. And then there's the question of what gets sacrificed to make those crime reduction targets a reality. Do counterterrorism efforts get scaled back? What about white-collar crime? You can't just throw everything at one problem without considering the potential consequences elsewhere.
It's all about balance,
Yeah,
right? Making sure you're not neglecting other crucial areas while pursuing a single, albeit important, objective.
exactly. And then there's the whole question of reform. Patel has talked a lot about his commitment to reforming the FBI, but it's all pretty vague. What does reform actually mean in this context? What concrete changes is he proposing?
Right, it's easy to throw around buzzwords like reform, but what does it look like in practice? Does he want to restructure the agency, shift its focus, overhaul its investigative methods?
Those are the questions we need answers to. Until we have more specifics, it's hard to judge whether his vision for reform aligns with what's actually needed or whether it's just, empty rhetoric.
So after this deep dive, we're left with more questions than answers. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It means there's a lot more to unpack, a lot more to consider.
Yeah, and that's what we want to encourage everyone listening to do. Dig deeper, ask questions, and form your own opinions.
Exactly. This nomination is far from a done deal, so stay tuned because this story is just getting started. And we're going to be here every step of the way to break it down for you. But for now, we want to leave you with this. If Patel is confirmed, how might his past associations and his views on January 6th impact the public's trust in the FBI? Especially among those who already have strong feelings about him and the events of that day. It's something to think about, something to keep in mind as we move forward.
It's going to be interesting to see how this all unfolds. And as always, we'll be here to help make sense of it.
So until next time, keep those critical thinking caps on, and we'll see you in the next deep dive.